Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to Barry's book reviews. This is episode number 43, and I've been experimenting today trying to record these as live streams. So I'm still trying to play around with the setup here. So if it looks a little strange, that's why. Anyway, okay, let's get onto the review. So today I'm reviewing a short story called 3 Days in That Autumn by Pak Wanseo, translated by Ryu Sukhee. And the Korean title is 그 가을의 사흘 동안. And the English translation was published as part of the Portable Library of Korean Literature in 2001. That's this edition here. But it's also been translated and included in at least one other collection of stories. It's quite a famous story. The original Korean story was, I think, published initially in 1985. Unfortunately, Pak Wanseo sadly passed away in 2011. However, she was a beloved and prolific writer over a very long career. And left behind quite a considerable body of work from which I've reviewed a few books already. You can find those on the channel, some other reviews of her books and short stories and short story collections. And she was often celebrated for writing about Korean society's social conventions and complexities. And many fans of her work, they enjoy her stories for their wit and their warmth. But today's story is one of her more challenging works. 3 Days in That Autumn is a story about the after effects of war, patriarchy, birth, and abortion. It's a complex and quite a disturbing look at an aspect of Korea that many would perhaps rather not think about. Now, she was, like I said, a very beloved writer. Her death in 2011 from complications due to gallbladder cancer was met with an outpouring of grief from fans and just from members of the public in general. And interestingly, although she didn't start her writing career until she was 40, she was a fixture in the Korean literature scene for 4 decades, and her books have sold millions of copies. She has, scores of fans, and she was often referred to by her fans and by the media, the literary establishment, as the Yop Chib Ajuma, which means the auntie next door. And like I said, she wasn't afraid to look at the darker areas of Korean history and society, and that's what she's definitely doing in this story. So, 3 Days in That Autumn is a story about a female doctor. She's spent 3 decades from the end of the Korean War performing abortions at a clinic in a Seoul suburb. She opened her clinic at the end of the war when she was in her 20s, and she was a newly qualified doctor at this time. But now it's the 1980s, and she's decided to retire on her 55th birthday, which is 3 days away. And the story charts these 3 days leading up to her self imposed retirement day, as well as her memories and reflections of the years and the decades that she has spent doing this type of work. The story begins with the doctor anticipating her retirement, and this causes her to reminisce about how she came to start her clinic in the first place. And initially, the reader, we might assume that her motivations stem from a desire to help women who might need to seek her out. She chooses an area near an American army camp in a slum to set up her abortion clinic. And she explains only a woman who has had an unwanted baby growing in her own womb knows the agony of it. Sickness and pain all elicit pity, but that particular suffering attracts only accusations and contempt. If the goal of the healing arts was to free people from diseases, my dream was to liberate women from that lonely agony, a suffering harder to endure than mere physical maladies. And this goal seems noble on the surface. However, we quickly learn that this doctor has a very complicated attitude to her work. And abortion was only relatively recently decriminalized in Korea. I think this was in 2019. And from 1953, the year the doctor in the story sets up her surgery, until 2019, as far as I understand, abortion was illegal in almost all cases. However, it was still relatively common. The ban wasn't strongly enforced, and some commentators note that the Korean government policies in the 1960s and 70s may have been a prime contributor to the number of women seeking abortions. Many of these women would have had to seek out surgeons, such as the one in this story. So why does the doctor in 3 days in that autumn have such a complicated attitude to her work? One of the first hints that our doctor doesn't see her work as a noble calling is when she scoffs at her father's admiration that she is doing humanitarian work in a very poor community. He thinks she's there to treat and help the poor, but she thinks to herself, I had simply resolved to profit from the wantonness around me. She knows this is an area with a great deal of prostitution due to the presence of the army base. She says, before long, I was performing several abortions a day. And 30 years later, she's saved enough that she has bought a house and she can retire in comfort. Was this her only motivation? Profit, greed? That doesn't seem to be quite the case. She says later, I've done my job driven by malicious hatred. Where does this hatred come from? Why does she hate the women who go to her and their unborn babies? We learn that her hatred comes from a traumatic event in her past that happened during the war and has continued to haunt her. So, what is Pak saying with this story? How is she commenting on Korean society during this period through her characterization of this uncaring doctor? So, the way she characterizes these decades and the accompanying rapid economic development is vicious and unsparing and entirely unforgiving. The doctor realizes she is part of the illegal sex industry that has continued over the years. The pimps treat her with a sense of camaraderie, they include her in their jokes, and they assume that she shares their worldview in some sense. She is part of what keeps this cycle going. And so she is bitter and resentful of this, and she can't reconcile herself to her position in this cycle. But she's also been an observer of the redevelopment and the growing prosperity of the neighborhood, and has cutting and sharp observations about the different classes of women who seek her out. And although it's only a short story, there are several strands and elements meshed together in quite a complicated and intricate relationship. So some of the passages in the story are extremely powerful. There's one that ends with the sentence, I build my thoughts in reverse, brick by brick, out of the rubble of lifelong prejudices. And the imagery is haunting and disturbing. In one sequence, she is followed by the eyes of the aborted fetuses, and when she says, "If all the babies I prevented from emerging into this world had lived, we might have needed to build another good-sized elementary school." It's quite a complicated story, but in its way, I think it's some kind of cruel, even minor masterpiece. And it's definitely worth reading. Anyway, today's book was 3 Days in That Autumn by Pak Wanseo. Thanks for watching.